If you have ever worked past your hours, cried from stress, or suffered from any kind of anxiety related to work, then this video is for you. With an experience of generalised anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder, I thought I knew all too well about handling stress, etc. But in November 2020, I contacted our HR department and said, I think I'm really suffering at work. And I was burnt out. I was working way into my evenings and my weekends, taking on way too much, not being able to say no to anything, constantly feeling like I had to prove myself and that nothing was good enough that I'd produced. I was burnt out with feelings of guilt and worry. Along with other help, I was recommended to watch a talk that Imogen Dall did to Bloomsbury on her book, The Burnout Survival Kit. I was left with feelings of relief and optimism. I pre-ordered the book and awaited its arrival. At the end of December 2020, I got my copy of the Burnout Survival Kit in the post. It took me just a day to read, but it's packed full of tips, advice, and personal accounts from Imogen herself. It's an essential guide to anyone with any job, covering all areas that may lead to burnout. Later in this video, I'm going to share an exclusive video with you that I had with Imogen Dall herself, so please make sure to stick around for that. Here is Imogen talking about who she is, her book, and what it's about.
My name's Imogen and I've been a freelance writer for about 6 years now. Although in the first couple of years I really didn't know what I was doing and my work habits were so bad that I very quickly became miserable, lost all motivation, hated what I was doing, and eventually suffered a panic attack that was so bad I thought it was a heart attack, and worse than that, I thought it meant that I was lazy and that I was a failure and that I couldn't do this. And that led me to not only thankfully seek help and work out how to deal with my anxiety and depression, but start writing and creating things around how to survive burnout, how to work from home, how to work in stressful office environments. And this year, Bloomsbury have published my guide as the Burnout Survival Kit. So if you feel like you've gone through any of those things, be it just feeling overwhelmed or terrible physical symptoms, or you're just really not sure why you're doing what you're doing anymore, I really hope this appeals to you, and I'm looking forward to talking about it a little more.
I'm absolutely delighted to now share with you the interview that I had with Imogen herself to talk more about the mind that created the Burnout Survival Kit, including Imogen's top 3 tips, her cat Pico. I hope you enjoy. The link to the book is listed in the description below, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Welcome and thank you for chatting with me again. So we're going to be talking about your book, The Burnout Survival Kit. Can you first of all just give me a bit of a background on why you created that book and what it means to you?
Yeah, do you want me to go from basically why I wrote it kind of thing?
Yeah, so you had a panic attack, is that right? And then it's kind of from there that you started writing down notes that helped you.
Basically, I had been freelancing for a couple of years and not really realizing that I had a lot of really negative work habits and had kind of internalized all of the difficulties I was facing as my own fault. And I just thought I was lazy and I wasn't working hard enough, and I couldn't understand why it was such a struggle for me to do basic things. And it just seemed to keep getting worse and worse. And got to the point where I started to experience quite serious anxiety and stress symptoms, like headaches, blurry eyes. I was breathing weird, and eventually started to get panic attacks, and the first one just completely threw me. I had no idea what it was, which is really ironic because I do know other people who suffer panic attacks, but I didn't realize it could be so physically debilitating. So I live really close to King's Hospital, and just went down the road basically, and they were sort of like, "You're fine, there's nothing wrong with you." And it was really, I just couldn't believe that. And they were right in a way. I was fine. It's just that what I thought I had wasn't what I was going in saying I had. So that sent me down a pathway of finally kind of taking my physical health seriously. And just part of that, I went to therapy, and I sort of talked to my GP and started to write down all of the problems I was having all the time, because I realized they would kind of repeat themselves and I would get into the same habits again. And basically a list of things started to form. And I turned it I ended up turning it into this zine. And I kind of, it's got my like dorky watercolor illustrations in it. And I think, as you can see, like it has a very similar contents page idea. And
Yeah.
I had started to form the idea of, really, I was sort of trying to help myself, but I think by thinking that I could help other people, it made it easier to deal with it in some level. And I was just blown away by the reception of this. I'd have made other silly creative projects before, but this one was really surprising because, you know, I would sort of talk to friends who I thought had their lives completely together and weren't going through anything at all. And they'd be saying, oh, me too. I have this problem all the time. I feel this. And I honestly couldn't believe it. And you sort of feel really silly that you think you're all on your own dealing with this. And so many people are just going through all of this stuff all the time. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of it. And Bloomsbury got hold of this and sort of gave me the idea to turn it into the book. But I had never, you know, had no intention. I didn't think anyone would be that interested. So it was kind of a surprise from then on. Yeah.
Sure. And you mentioned about people you know and perhaps people in your family that had suffered from anxiety and had panic attacks. But so the one that you went to the hospital, that was your first experience of a panic attack. You hadn't had anything prior to that.
Yeah. I realized thinking back that I had them before and not realized what they were. So I think the first one I'd had was, but I was going on a trip with two other friends in Morocco, and we were driving across this desert and we had run out of water. It wasn't a big deal. We were going to get to the next place in a couple of hours, but something about that freaked me out. And I had all these weird body sensations and my body sort of started to close in on itself, and I had weird breathe and all this. And I just thought that I'd eaten something, and I don't know, I didn't know what was going on. But thinking back, there were other points like that where I could see my body had a tendency to react in that way. And I just had no idea that when I let my stress get to a certain point, and when I didn't know basic breathing techniques or anything, it would just get to that point really quickly.
So the book came about, the Burnout Survival Kit, and in there's a lot of facts and figures. So what sort of research did you have to do, both primary and secondary, to create, you know, the scientific side behind Burnout Survival Kit?
I guess I just started reading anything I could get my hands on. There's a little list of some of the books I liked in particular in there. Like, for example, I really liked How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. I also read How to Survive the End of the World When It's All in Your Head by Aaron Gillies, who's on Twitter a lot. And I think through that, I just read more and more and started to, I guess, get interested in the science behind some of the physical reactions, because I think it legitimized it for me. It made it feel less like this crazy thing that just happens to some people, and understanding, oh, okay, no, this is, you know, I'm having a natural fight or flight response that everybody has. It's just that I'm interpreting it the wrong way. And so I started to, read science journals and try to understand basically how that works. I'm obviously not a scientist, but just getting a sort of general grounding of all that was really useful for me, and made me feel like I wasn't just telling people, oh, I think this is going to work. I really wanted to say, no, look, people who actually know about these things have found that, for example, deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing does induce a tranquil state. It's not, you know, some kind of made up hippy dippy thing, which I definitely would have thought before doing it. Yeah.
So along with all the science, the book has got a lot of your personal tips in there, and there are so many, but if you could, the top 3, what would they be?
Yeah, picking up on what I just said, I think the first thing is learning how to breathe. I was really reluctant to think this was a real thing. You know, I was sort of like, what do you mean I need to learn how to breathe? I'm breathing just fine every day. And I didn't know that, for example, people who suffer anxiety in particular are often shallow breathing all the time, and they just don't realize it. And so it became a kind of journey to learn what it means to actually kind of reset yourself for a second, do 5 to 10 really deep, proper breaths, which I talk through in the book. And also that led me to getting into yoga, which is something I had avoided for a long time, because everyone who tries to tell you to do yoga, it seems too good to be true. You know, they get this weird glow on their face and they're like, oh, you have to do it. You know, I can do a lizard pose now. And you're like, what is this? And I just couldn't buy it. But when it clicked in my head that what it really is just a way to get you to breathe deeply for a long period of time. And actually I have a background in gymnastics. I was an elite gymnast for a long time, and learning how to stretch and become flexible, we'd often be told to breathe deeply because it relaxes your body and it helps your muscles adapt more naturally to those shapes. It was suddenly like, oh, okay, it's the same principle. I had to learn how to catch myself when I wasn't breathing properly. And that was probably the single biggest thing that changed my workday in terms of getting through it in the thick of it. And the other two things I think are two versions of setting boundaries. The first one is to set a physical boundary for your workspace. It sounds really simple, but things like ergonomic chairs, having your table at the right level, good lighting, all of that stuff, which I go through, is really important, not just for your physical health, but so that you have a space where that's set for work and where you only do work. So to try and maintain that boundary between your work and your life, which I think is really important to people right now, especially as a lot more of us are working from home than have ever had to do before. And I think when you're working full-time in an office, you don't think about that separation because it's automatic, but it's so important when you're freelancing. And as an extension of that, having the boundaries around your time. So the amount of time you feel you can reasonably be expected to be available for work, and just setting what that is for you. It may even be in your contract, 8 to 5 or whatever. And you can even put it in the, in your email signature, for example, or, you know, talk to your boss or your team about this is the sort of times that we're going to be on, and I don't want people sending emails at 10:30 at night asking for something for the next morning, because even though that might mean nothing to them, it stresses out the person that gets the email. So that sort of behavior I think is really crucial to just maintaining the balance you need to be able to recharge at the end of the day.
Yeah, perfect. It's really interesting what you said about yoga as well, that initially you weren't so keen to try it and it seemed too good to be true in your eyes.
I did not want to buy yoga pants.
Yeah, and so is that something that you kind of recommend to people, you know, try things that you don't initially feel that you want to do or you don't think it's for you, just try it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about the internet, for example, is that you could try a lot of this stuff just on your own, and that's sort of what helped me get my toe in the water, as it were, was I discovered yoga for Adrienne, who I'm sure everybody else already knows about, and was able to feel like, okay, I can try this. Nobody needs to know I'm doing this. I can just wear my pajamas, which I still mostly do, and I can give this a go. And I do think, I think if you're at the point where, particularly if your physical symptoms are really bad, your mental health is really bad, you're going through the same motions and you don't know why you feel so miserable. Yeah, sometimes you've just got to try injecting something new. Even if you find you hate it, I still feel that can lead you, oh, well, maybe I'd like this sort of thing a bit more, or can be a useful mindset to have.
Perfect. So I've got a copy of the book here, and for anyone that hasn't got the book yet, the contents page is split into emergency problems, short-term problems, and long-term problems. Was it kind of hard making up that contents page, and was there anything that, you know, are there any conversations about that should be in this section rather than this section?
Yeah, there was a lot of that, actually. Probably I spent almost as much time with the team at Bloomsbury deciding how it was going to be laid out as I did actually writing it. And it's interesting, I had made an attempt with the original zine, which is really just focused on if you're a creative freelancer. And obviously they were like, we'd love to expand this to all kinds of modern work. So we're talking about full-time employees, public sector employees. So it was, you know, I have worked full-time in an office as well, but it was trying to get your head around what are the actual problems where you feel like you have to deal with it in the moment, and what are the ones that you can sort of shelve a little bit, but then do actually you need to get to eventually. That surprisingly is quite hard to decide. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what people think. I don't know if we got it right necessarily, but that was the general kind of gist. Yeah.
I expect, I mean, saying you're not getting it right, I expect for a lot of people it differs as well. Some people it might be a short-term problem, and for some people it might be a long-term problem as well. So I think there's not necessarily a right answer.
Yeah, there was things like, for example, feeling patronized, because in that moment you're being patronized, you're very frustrated and you want to deal with it in that moment. But also I think we ended up saying it was a long-term problem, because the way you solve it is going to be more you know, learning how to work with that person, learning how to communicate in a subtle but firm way that you don't like the way they treat you, and those sorts of things. It's not necessarily something you could just do quickly with yourself. So I think that ended up being the kind of difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for any of those sections, like the emergency, the short term and the long term, is there anything now that the book is out, is there anything that you wish you could go back and you add in, or if there's anything since the book was published that you think that should be added in at the next reprint or anything like that?
Yeah, I think because while it was being published, coronavirus kicked off, and it was really interesting because when I had first started talking to Bloomsbury about the book, there was a lot of, oh, we probably don't need to do so much of this freelancing work from home type material. Let's focus more on office relationships and what do you want to do with your career and all this stuff. And we've very much gone into a world where I think people are struggling to work from home. So I do wish I could have, I'd love to write a lot more about things like feeling stuck in endless Zoom calls, what I feel like you might call presenteeism, like sending emails just to look like you're doing work, or scheduling meetings just to look like you're doing work, because there's this anxiety that if you can't be seen to be working, that your boss might think you're not doing your job properly because working from home is cushy and lazy and you can wear your pajamas and the whole cliche. I would love to kind of talk about how BS a lot of those arguments are, and let people feel like it doesn't matter what you're wearing, doesn't matter what time you do it in the day. If you're getting your job done, you're doing a great job. And the other thing that kind of ties into that is a lot of office management software kind of tracks how much people are online, tracks how many emails they send, how much they participate in the chat. And this is just so dystopian to me, because depending on what your job is, that may have nothing to do with doing a good job. And I feel like people are feeling this real pressure to keep up appearances. And, even just the fact you have to see your face while you talk to other people, and you're sort of staring at all these faces in a way that you would never actually do in real life is has all this extra stress that, I would love to try and write a little bit more about some of those.
And how have you personally found working from home? And I'm aware that you did a bit of working from home beforehand anyway, so how have you personally found it?
It's funny because I think when it first happened, a lot of my friends were sort of thrilled in a way, like, this is so exciting, how great, I can learn to bake bread and do all this stuff, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to learn Chinese. And me just sort of internally going, just you wait and see. Of course, slowly them realizing, like, oh wow, this is I didn't expect the extra mental load of having to manage my day like this, and how it feels to never leave a small physical space, and all of those things I've been talking to a lot of people about, which is really great. And I'm really happy that that's all in the book. But for me personally, because I was sort of already at that baseline, it was okay at first because I knew what to expect. But I have to be honest, the last couple of months in particular, I've really started to feel the drag. And because and I do worry, a lot of the tips in the book are things like, go out and meet someone, go for a walk, go travel somewhere, go do all these things that we just can't do. And you sort of start to feel stuck. Like, I don't really know how to recharge myself. A lot of my coping mechanisms have just disappeared overnight. So yeah, that has been really hard. And yeah, like I said, yoga's been good, eating well, but it's sort of all the boring stuff is fine, but all the fun things that I would normally do have gone. And yeah.
And when we spoke last as well, you were saying about how when your book initially was published, you had these dreams of going to book fairs and doing talks and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How has that kind of affected you? And, is there plans to do that in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I'm miserable about it. It's sort of, very first world problems compared to, I think, the scale of the problem. But it would be so lovely to meet and talk to people about it. I think the thing that I've really got out of this more than anything is the realization that so many people understand how I felt, and so many people have come to tell me, I really appreciated this tip, or I loved this idea, and this has really helped me. And that has meant so much to me. So yeah, that has probably been the one thing, not so much that I want to stand in front of a room and be like, well done me, or that it's just so nice to be able to connect with people on an issue that's typically so private and so embarrassing in a way, at least for me, it felt.
Absolutely. And with that said, do you think there is still a bit of a taboo about like mental health and about struggling at work?
Yes, and I do worry that particularly as people feel insecure in their jobs at the moment. They don't know if they might be furloughed, or they don't know if their job's going to be there when they return, or if their business is going to survive. That I think people are even more reluctant than usual to say, oh, hey, I'm also really struggling with my work, because you don't want to be labeled as someone who can't cope, and, you know, who might not be as useful to the team, or all these other terms that we throw about that have nothing to do with who we are as people and how good we actually do our jobs. So I am really worried about that, and I hope that this can help start some conversations, not just among people who are suffering burnout, but people working at managerial and higher levels, looking at their teams, saying we really do need to support each other through this, because it's just not normal, and it will end. But, you know, you've got to let people feel okay to say, I can't do this much longer in this way.
And it's interesting what you said about the managers as well. Is there a target audience for your book? Is there a group of people in particular that you want to read the book?
I suppose in my head, I was thinking about people who are actively suffering burnout symptoms or feel they're having burnout. But it was while developing that and doing a lot of the research that I started to realize how endemic the problem was, and how realistically the culture of a business has a huge impact on how you experience burnout. And it made me realize it's all well and good to tell people, okay, here's some stuff you can try. We'll get through this. It's going to be okay. But that's only going to get you so far, when the bigger problem is really you have a toxic work environment. You know, people are all so insecure about their work that they don't work well together, or perhaps even you don't know what you're doing it for. There's no unifying purpose. There's no sense of camaraderie. All of these things, you can't solve that on your own realistically. You could create conversations with your coworkers and sort of try to get an organic thing going, but really you need sort of direction from the top to talk about that. So I did include a lot of sections, which I'm so glad they included, because I was really worried Bloomsbury would be like, no, we don't, that's not relevant, we don't need that. But I did try to talk about what it means to build a positive work culture. And luckily enough, my mum actually runs her own business, so I was able to talk to her a lot, and obviously growing up with her, understood what it meant to set your own work culture, and how possible it is to, well, how much of a difference that one person can make when they decide what kind of culture it's going to be.
And you mentioned about your experience with Bloomsbury, and this is the first book that you've published. How was your experience with Bloomsbury, and what was the kind of reception that you received since the book has been published?
Honestly, it was so great, start to finish. I probably don't even have anything interesting to say. I think my background is I've mostly worked in advertising and done kind of film and screenwriting work. And there are a lot of lovely people in both of those industries, but typically it's quite aggressive. There are a lot of difficult personalities. There are a lot of, yes, we're definitely doing this, and then never hearing from them again. And I had just gotten used to that as a baseline of freelancing. So to have gone into a situation where I was just told, yeah, we love this, we're going to make this, how do you want to do it, was just amazing. I loved working with them, and everything they brought to the table, I felt enriched the project and just made it a better and better piece of writing. So I would definitely recommend anyone to submit their manuscripts there if possible. And you had another question. What was it?
Yeah, just like the reception that you received since the book has been published. Right. So obviously it was published around a bit of a weird time. So how have you found that?
Yeah, I think I still can't really say. I'm not entirely sure. I've only got anecdotal evidence really of people telling me that they enjoyed it, people messaging me, and they seem happy with it. So I can only assume it's going well, but I don't really know yet.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. You had a story as well about hot pants and the illustrator for that as well. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, that was probably one of the highlights of realizing I loved working in publishing, and that I wanted to try and do some more projects. Was there's a tip in the book where I talk about this mythical creature that I've invented called Hot Pants, the hypercritical horse. And it's sort of a way to deal with those negative voices that come into your head. when you start to hear yourself talking yourself down and saying horrible things, sometimes I just try to imagine this like horrible show horse trots in and says them to you. And there's something really funny about not just it coming from such a ludicrous horse, but hearing it as if it's said by someone else nearly always makes me laugh. And when the illustrator drew it though, she drew like kind of a really cute looking horse. And I was like, no, he's got to be ridiculous. And he needs to wear hot pants and like, he needs to look really like sassy and horrible. And I felt like such a diva. That was like my one change, was we had to fix the horse illustration. I was like, this is so surreal. But I'm glad. And I think it looks really like him now.
And on the subject of animals, you have a cat, Pico, is that right? And how has that helped with your mental health?
Yeah, I don't know if you can...
There he is.
Yeah, no, he's great. I think if you can and you have the space or you have the ability to have an animal while you're working from home is really amazing. I'm honestly constantly blown away that this furry creature actually wants to spend time with me. There's something really rewarding about that kind of love. And you know, he was adopted from Battersea, and he was a very grumpy, miserable old man. He was already 6 years old. And I don't know, I just loved him. And then just slowly kind of, we built a relationship, and he's my little teammate now. Yeah.
Is there any other tips like that you think people in lockdown and are working from home, obviously if they're not able to get any pets or anything like that because of the situations they're in, is there anything else that you can add in, something from the book or something that you've realised since working from home?
Yeah, it is getting really hard. I suppose one thing that's been really useful for me is I've had weekly meetings with my writers group. Obviously that's specific to writing. But I do think the idea of having a regular group that has a sort of goal or subject to it has given me a lot of really useful structure that doesn't feel, you know, it helps you not associate sitting in front of your computer with always being stuck in boring meetings and stuff like that. And I have really enjoyed that, although it is just more screen time, so perhaps not for everyone. But just with one of my friends recently, we were talking about starting a listening club so that we could listen to albums together. So there's, you know, lots of different things you could do like that. But yeah, it is kind of more screen stuff, so not great.
A lot of the audience on my channel is like publishing hopefuls, so people that are looking to get into publishing and recognising that obviously it's a really competitive industry. Is there anything from your tips from the Burnout Survival Kit that you think would be quite prevalent to that audience, and you know, anything you can suggest for them, you know, in this hopeless struggle to try and get into the industry when there's so much competition at the moment?
Yes, I think be kind to yourself at the moment, because the economy's never really been worse. And I personally graduated from uni into the financial crisis, so I know what you're going through. It is horrible. You will get there. Just try not to be too impatient, because I think I was so frustrated because I knew I had the skills and I knew I could do it, and I really doubled down on myself and felt like I've just got to work harder and just send more stuff and meet more. And I think you just got to be really measured about that sort of behavior and try to pick the right things that make you feel good and really feel like they're going to resonate with you personally, rather than just applying for everything. You know, I think it's better often to put your whole heart and soul into one application, or a couple. Let's not put all your eggs in one basket, but rather than just sending the same thing everywhere. I think people can tell. And I do think the cover letter is as a writer, I suppose, is a really golden opportunity to try and get your personality through, rather than just giving a list of skills. But I really feel for you, because where are the networking opportunities right now, and where are the mentoring opportunities? And those would have been the things that I would have said really help. One thing that I think has surprised me looking back on my career is that it hasn't necessarily been things that I've applied for that have worked out. It's been just people that I've met along the way. And I'm talking about people on my level who I've liked working with and develop a natural friendship with, who get back to you when they do have an opportunity a couple of years down the line. And my career has kind of grown naturally from those genuine relationships. It really changed the way I thought about meeting people and developing my career, because you sort of feel this pressure to show up and talk to the CEO almost about why you're the best person and please hire me. And there's this natural desperation in that conversation that's always really unappealing to people. But and rather, not being snobby about the people who are on your level, who you might on a bad day think, oh, I'm competing with them. They're actually often your best ally, because you could create work together, you could create something together. I know I'm speaking, I guess, as a writer, it's a slightly different proposition to getting a staff role. But even still, I think it's important to know who your peers are and what your network is, because those, again, when we talk about mental health and work-life balance, they're going to be so important to your career. And, they might be able to help bring you into an organization that they've had success in. I think it's also worth considering, what are the kind of left field routes into where you're trying to go? I knew, for example, I really wanted to be a creative writer of some kind, and ended up going into copywriting, so full-time advertising work, which on the surface is horrible. I mean, you're writing spam emails and billboards and like really kind of tacky stuff, and you have to ape the brand values of some company, and you're not writing in your own voice. And a lot about that is, a lot of people would say you're selling out as a writer, for example, but it definitely, not only was it an easier industry for me to get into, it forced me to work as a writer all day, every day, meet lots of people, learn how to thrive in a professional environment. Obviously we've talked through a lot of how I kind of glamorized an overworking personality, which was definitely not good. But on the whole, I would recommend, I would do the same thing again, I think, because it gave me this incredible grounding that I think if I'd just gone straight into trying to be a freelance novelist somehow, if that even exists, I don't think I would have got there.
And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about your goals. So your personal goals, if you have any plans to write any more, if you want to do some more promotional work for Burnout Survival Kit, like events in future when we can finally see people in person. Do you have any plans like that?
Yeah, I was already doing kind of workshops and sessions based on the material I was developing for the book. So it would be really great to get back into that. And I love doing that. And so if you have a company that wants someone to come in and actually talk hard and fast advice, I really love doing that, if that's ever going to be a thing that comes back. And obviously I'm still writing. I'm halfway through my first novel. Who knows what's going to happen with that, and some other small projects. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of going through a transition because like I said, I was working mostly in film, and this book kind of came out of nowhere for me, based on something I had made for fun. And I've had such a good experience with it that it's really made me reevaluate where I want to take my career. And I have kind of started to reel back on a lot of the screenwriting work and think, oh, actually, I really do prefer the world of publishing. Maybe there's a space for me there. I don't know. So yeah, it's a bit of a question mark. I'm just going to follow my heart, I think.
Yeah, amazing. And the book has done so well. So to anyone watching, please do get your copy, and we'll put a link in the description of the video as well, because I've read it front to back and absolutely loved it. I mean, it's helped me so much, and even some of the chapters that I didn't think would apply to me, it was still so worth reading. So thank you for creating it.
I'm glad to help.
I'm so pleased to finally share this video with you, and I hope it helped you in some way. Let me know in the comments section if you found it useful and if you'll be ordering your copy, of course. A massive thank you to Imogen for everything, and thank you for watching.